Hello, welcome to Turning Trade Allies into True Allies, best practices for maintaining productive relationships that strengthen commercial program performance. This is the fifth in a series of webinars that PECI is hosting with the goal of providing a forum to come together, share our challenges, lessons learned, and to help evolve the energy efficiency program. Before we jump in, let's get oriented with WebEx. On the right side of your screen, you should see a control panel. Please submit questions anytime during the webinar using the Q&A panel located near the bottom right of your screen. You can press the send button and you don't need to select send privately. I'll hold all questions until the Q&A portion of the webinar. Please note that all phones are automatically muted. If you're experiencing technical difficulties, please submit an inquiry via the chat function on your control panel. During the webinar, we'll ask a few polling questions to better understand where you're at and what you'd like to learn. We're hoping that this will make things more interactive, and we can use your polling feedback to help us shape the webinar as we go along. When you close out of this webinar, you'll be redirected to a short survey. Please take a moment to provide feedback and let us know what other webinar topics you're interested in. We'll share the slides after the presentation. With that, let's get started. We have three panelists from PECI today. Monica Tilges supervises our HVAC quality maintenance program. Jeff Mitchell leads a Trade Allied training and technical support program. And Tracy Hatch manages PECI's Air Care Plus program. Today's webinar will focus on three areas of Trade Ally relationships: recruiting, technical support, and training, education, and recognition. For each of these areas, our panelists will talk about how their programs operate and explain the role their trade allies play. They'll also share barriers and lessons learned and conclude with a recommendation of the types of programs best suited for each approach. Let's begin with the polling question. Are you currently implementing a program with a focus on trade allies? First answer, no, but I'd like to learn more. B, I have some ideas but have not yet incorporated them into my program. C, I'm currently implementing a program with a strong trade ally focus. While you're answering, I'd like to introduce Monica Tilges. Monica is a senior program manager at PECI and is responsible for assisting in the implementation and continuous improvement of an HVAC quality maintenance program. Along with her experience in energy efficiency, she has a background in carbon offsets, electrical wholesale, and the Peace Corps. Monica, take it away.
Okay, so while we're waiting for those results to pop up, I guess I'll get started. First of all, my presentation is on Trade Ally recruiting. It's going to focus on the program that I work with, the Commercial HVAC Quality Maintenance Program. I think we're all pretty well aware as to why Trade Allies are important, otherwise we wouldn't be on this call. They are the ones who drive participation in the programs, ultimately resulting in the energy savings that the utility is ultimately driving towards. A lot of challenges that are involved in recruiting trade allies. I'll get into more detail on the specific challenges that my program faced later, but some examples include bad experiences with prior programs, making contractors a little gun-shy, or we're asking the trade allies to make a large investment in actually getting up to speed on this program and getting out there to sell it, which is another hurdle to overcome. Before I go any further, it looks like we have some results from the first polling questions. The answer that seemed to be most popular with 71% is, sorry, looking for the answer. I'm currently implementing a program with a strong trade ally focus. So we have a lot of experienced folks on the phone, which is great. And about 29% said I have some ideas but have not yet incorporated them into my program. So hopefully we'll be able to provide some valuable information to all of you so to give a good spectrum of experience here. A little bit about my program. Again, it's an HVAC quality maintenance program. One thing to keep in mind as we go through this, and I'll remind you of it a couple times, is that trade allies in this program are essentially equivalent to contractors. About 98% of our trade allies are actually contractors, so I'll be focusing on that group. So a quick overview on the quality maintenance program. Again, this is commercial. This is kind of a unique program. Historically, HVAC maintenance programs have been more of a kind of get in, get out thing where they go in, they change a filter, they clean a coil, and they get their incentives and they pop out. This is a very different program. The intent of this program is market transformation. It's based on an industry standard. We require the trade ally, which is the contractor, and the customer to actually sign a 3-year maintenance agreement, which is a very long-term commitment. We require that within 6 months, all units that are in the program are brought to an efficient operating state, which again is another big investment that we're asking. And we pay out 7 incentive types over through the course of the 3-year maintenance agreement. The intent is to match those incentives with when the cash outflow is happening for the customer or contractor. So, for example, when the units are brought to an efficient operating state, we provide incentives to help offset the cost of those repairs as much as possible. The ultimate objective, again, is market transformation, including things like improving air quality and thermal comfort, educating customers about the value of maintenance. Now, this one is a little bit complicated because you have to have a little bit of an understanding about the industry. I'll give you a quick primer. Basically, as customers, when there's cool air coming out when they want cool air to come out, and there's hot air coming out when they want hot air coming out, they don't think that there's a problem. They think everything's fine. That may not be the case on the rooftop. And with the climate of reduced budgets, one of the first things that folks take out are the factors that they don't understand, and HVAC is one of those. So this industry has become increasingly commoditized, where people aren't willing to pay for high-quality maintenance because they don't understand the benefit of it. And it's also caused the contractors to have to change their business models to best fit that. And I want to be clear that it's not every customer who doesn't understand. It's not every contractor or technician who's playing the commoditization game, but it is a dominant force in the industry right now. Along those lines, another market transformation objective is to increase the quality of the technicians, because they are generally only changing filters and cleaning coils. We need to reinforce all those good things that they learned in school and different training programs as they get into doing quality maintenance, because they might be a little rusty. Another market transformation objective is to increase the adoption of energy-saving technologies. One of the cool things about this program is because of this long-term relationship, we have very high touch with that contractor or trade ally, and they have a high touch with their customer, which means that we have a really great avenue to introduce new energy-saving technologies to give that additional benefit to those customers. So the trade ally role in this program, they are on point to recruit the customers. They have to communicate that value, again, because they're asking that customer to sign a 3-year maintenance agreement, which is a long-term commitment, and they have to do a lot of paperwork that goes with that, so there's another investment on the part of the trade ally. They also have to create a detailed unit inventory, which is something that they would not normally do. Next phase is that they have to repair the units. Again, that requires that the trade ally communicate the value of the program to the customer, because oftentimes these units are in a large state, a high rate of state of disrepair, and require a large investment to get up to an efficient operating state. Once they bring those units to operating condition, then they have more paperwork to fill out. Finally, for the remainder of the 3 years, they have to continue to maintain those units. And with that comes communicating the value, because again, this is a 3-year program or 3-year commitment, but at the end of the 3 years, our hope is that they will continue to pay, they will understand the value of increased maintenance, and will continue that without program support. So, communicating value, paperwork, lots of communication. All of these things are, I'm bringing these up and reinforce them because this is one of the kind of key qualities of this program, is that it requires a large commitment from those trade allies, which makes them more difficult to recruit. So overcoming barriers, the problem. With this particular utility, there's been a history of poorly received programs, whether they felt like they were actually undermining the contractors felt like they were actually undermining the market, or took too long to receive incentive dollars, or what have you. The host of reasons is long, and I'm sure they're not unique. We had difficulty enrolling the trade allies for a number of reasons, but a lot of it is because, again, of the investment that it requires them to get up to speed on the program and to really get over the hump of being able to sell it to their customers. And another big problem that we faced is that with this particular program, we were able to get limited support from utility reps. And the primary reason for that is because the utility compensates their reps based on the number of energy savings that they bring in for their customer. However, with kind of the political structure, they were not allowed to claim energy savings from doing this program. The only people that could claim savings was this program itself, which meant that the utility reps were not incentivized to actually go out and sell the program. It doesn't mean that we are not getting support from utility reps. Some of them recognize that this can be offered in a suite of products to their customers and help them get energy savings that way. So we are still getting some engagement, but it's very small compared to most programs. The solution that we found that was ultimately really driving enrollment for us was a customer marketing campaign. Specifically, what we did is we sent out a couple of mailers spaced a few months apart to key customers that fit the profile that the utility had defined. And we got a tremendous response. The customers told their contractors to enroll. We got a lot of calls from contractors saying, our customer said we have to enroll. What is this program about? We saw definitely a spike in Trade Ally enrollment after those mailers went out. And it was interesting because some of those first few contractors were rather aggressive, which meant that they were going out to develop new business, which meant that those customers were going to their existing contractor relationships and saying, hey, do you want to participate in this program or should I take my business elsewhere? So we had that kind of a nice cycle that resulted from that. Lessons learned. The purpose of this is not to say send out the mailers and you're fine. There's a lot more groundwork that needs to be done first. You need to get the word out there so that people understand what the program is and it's reputable. You need to reach out to the industry groups. Those folks have a lot of touch and they can add a lot of credibility to your program. Do your direct outreach. Go to those trade shows. Have host events for folks to get educated about the program. Get publications out and do your press releases. All of these things help to lend credibility so that when the contractor or customer hears about this, they can do a little research or they've heard of it before, so it makes it a little bit easier for them to get over. Another lesson learned that I mentioned before is that the competition from other trade allies helps to get folks engaged. So as much as you can foster that in a healthy way, of course, is good for your program and driving enrollment. And again, our real success point with getting trade allies enrolled was the direct marketing to customers. But again, recruitment is easier when you enlist everyone. Don't just throw all your eggs in one basket, and don't be afraid to be creative. And marketing directly to customers was a point of creativity for us, and it ultimately ended up being our big driver. This approach may not be successful for all programs. Some of the hallmarks of our program that I think made this especially successful were that we actually offer incentives directly to customers. So when you're sending those mailers out to customers, they get pretty excited because they see that they get dollars, and it makes them a little bit more motivated to push their contractor to get enrolled. In this industry, there's also high cost of losing the customer work. Commercial, first of all, where the contracts are generally larger than in the residential world. And this program is forcing a long-term trade ally commitment. So 3 years. We're not talking about a get-in, get-out kind of fix where it doesn't disrupt any relationship. If you're a contractor and you lose a customer to somebody in this program, they're gone for 3 years. So you really want to, the cost of losing those customers is quite high for the contractor. Also, competitive services. For most customers, do not recognize the difference between contractor A and contractor B. That's not to say that relationships aren't important. There are definitely folks who are quite loyal to their current contractors. There are also folks who are ultimately more price sensitive than anything. So these factors made it this approach particularly well suited for our program. Other issues or other items that kind of made it easier for this approach to work. There were prior negative experiences, so getting those customers engaged helped to force contractors into it. They didn't have to come to it on their own. And it was very beneficial for us because a fast ramp was really required. A lot of us have goals as implementers that we have to meet in order to keep our clients happy. And oftentimes that's tied to trade ally enrollment or contractor enrollment. So this was a nice way for us to be able to reach those goals quickly. Great. So that's the end of my portion of the presentation. Again, questions will be answered at the end of all the presentations, but I'm going to move into the live poll question number 2. What type of support do your trade allies typically request? A, technical information about measures. B, financing options for customers. C, general training and education about the program. While you folks are answering that question, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Jeff Mitchell. Jeff is a Senior Technical Manager for PECI. He and his team manage trade ally engagement, training, and outreach initiatives for large investor-owned utility. Jeff specializes in small commercial energy efficiency, behavior-based energy efficiency, and integrated DSM program design and implementation. Jeff, take it away.
All right, Monica, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I will review the answers to the polling question when they come in. But until then, I will go ahead and get started. Here at PECI, my team provides, like Monica mentioned, third-party technical support and education to utility trade allies. And the definition of trade allies here is similar to Monica's. Essentially, we're talking about contractors or energy efficiency consultants who complete energy-efficient upgrades for utility customers, and often they submit the incentive application on their behalf. These trade allies are typically not directly endorsed or employed by the utility. This trade ally-driven approach is really common in utility general commercial programs where they rely on that free workforce to market and develop projects. Okay, before I move on, we have results from our poll. It looks like 57%, answer C, general training and education about the program, with 30% looking for more technical information about measures, and 13 were looking for financing options. I'm actually surprised by that. Okay, so when we create a trade ally technical support program for a client, a primary and crucial step is to identify the barriers that the trade allies face. We typically will perform an extensive needs assessment to understand the priorities, needs, and issues that trade allies face when promoting energy efficiency projects. The needs assessment it might include tools like surveys, focus groups, or maybe one-on-one interviews with a pool of trade allies. The next step would be to segment the trade allies in order to identify the strategy best suited to reach each group. For example, you might want to segment by end use, putting your lighting contractors in one pool, and your HVAC contractors in another. Or maybe by familiarity with the program. A trade ally that completes 20 or more projects per year is going to have a very different need than a trade ally that completes one project every 2 years. After we identify the needs of the trade ally group, we would develop a customized approach for this trade ally network that would usually include direct technical support, a training and education program, and targeted program collateral. For the direct technical support, we would usually establish a call center with an 800 number and a direct email. And I found that staffing Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. is sufficient as long as a typical request is addressed within one business day. We usually receive questions that range from, how to fill out the application to calculate energy savings, and we do get a lot of questions about emerging technology, like, how can I get my new energy efficient widget, included in the utility program. For the training and education, we like to use a blended approach that will include both webinars and in-person classes that provide both entry-level program overviews and deeper technical training, such as like the targeted refrigeration or HVAC training. And we've also found that the general overview trainings, if they're repeated monthly, are always really well attended. And then to augment these two strategies, we usually will develop marketing collateral that can be used by existing and new trade allies and by the utility staff. And we may create a utility-branded microsite to kind of pull all that content together into one easy-to-navigate place designed for trade allies specifically. Okay, as I mentioned before, the trade allies in this program model serve two purposes. They advise their customers, who are also the utility customers, on energy efficiency, technologies, and on the utility program. The trade allies will also install the technologies, and quite often they submit the incentive application on behalf of their customer. So I think it's important to note that a well-prepared and well-supported trade ally will have a positive reflection on the utility and the program. And conversely, an unprepared trade ally can reflect poorly on the utility. Now, the most common barriers we find, I don't think are going to come as a big shock to any of you. They're that trade allies have limited direct program support, and that they need help across a range of utility programs. And when you operate across a range of utility programs, that means you typically have to operate across a range of utility program managers. And so a solution we've found is really that a single point of contact is key. And that the newer trade allies require multiple touches over a single project. And then the results of our programs have been very positive. We have about a 98% satisfaction rating, and we've also found that about 35% of the trade allies that operate within a utility program, actually do utilize the technical support. And then one surprise is that about 15% of our calls and emails come from the utility staff, the account managers, and occasionally the engineers. Okay, a few lessons learned. First, utility managers and engineers will likely use a technical support program, and you should tailor the program accordingly, especially the live training. Utility staff, tend to have very different needs than the trade allies, and may ask questions that are better kept internal. Second, most trade allies won't know or care that the technical support is being provided by a third party. They're usually just happy to have a direct line to call to get their questions answered. And third, this approach to technical support provides a lot of data. Having all the calls come into, again, one location provides it's a ton of usable data that can be used to inform program decisions and can be used for planning or evaluation. And an example, we've had trade allies identify errors in program terms and conditions. They've identified broken calculators. They've identified code issues, baseline code requirements that were actually no longer accurate, and even incentive levels that outweigh the project costs. Okay, the best suited programs. Large utilities with complex programs are really the key to this approach, or the target for this approach. Trade allies often need support to understand and navigate the process for enrolling as a trade ally, understanding the incentives, and I think, most importantly, keeping up with the programs as they change over time. Programs that have an electronic application, a lot of our calls are about how to fill out an electronic application. Electronic applications will often have logic in place that will keep you from submitting your application until it is completely filled out. Whereas with a paper application, the trade ally can fill it out as far as they can, and then they can go ahead and mail it in, and then the account manager, the program manager will help them complete the application as part of that intake. And then obviously trade ally-driven programs. The larger the pool of trade allies, the more support that will be needed. And chances are, if there is a large pool of existing trade allies. There's an even larger pool of potential trade allies out there that we can be recruiting or marketing directly to. Okay, so we're going to move on to the third live polling question. Have you used recognition activities to strengthen your trade ally relationship? A, I have not yet considered recognition. B, I've implemented some recognition tactics, but I would like to get a few new ideas. C, I've used recognition tactics. And D, I don't think recognition would work for my program. And while you are all working on that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the next speaker, Tracy Hatch. Tracy manages PECI's Air Care Plus program, an HVAC diagnostic tune-up program providing above and beyond maintenance services to commercial electric customers. Her involvement with the program over multiple contract cycles allows for unique insight into its trade ally relationships and their correlation to the program's success. Take it away, Tracy.
Thank you, Jeff, and welcome to everybody on the phone. While you're working on answering that polling question, again, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I will be speaking to the training, education, and recognition component that's so crucial in turning your budding trade ally relationships into long sustaining partnerships. Air Care Plus has been around, started as a pilot in 2002, and we have been with our current client since 2006. And one of the challenges we've really faced throughout that entire period has been helping contractors incorporate our program into their business model. That seems to be a difficult piece for the contractors, and of course that plays into what Monica was talking about in recruitment. We do a lot of activity on the front end to make sure we are bringing in the contractors best suited to incorporate our program into their business model. But once we hone that down, it really comes into play in how we train, educate, and recognize them. So it looks like we had some answers from our poll. 50% of you said that I've implemented some recognition tactics, but I'd like to get some new ideas, so that's wonderful to know. 25% have not yet considered recognition tactics. Another 20% have successfully used recognition tactics, and 5% don't think that these tactics would work for their type of program. So thank you very much for that input. So speaking specifically about how trade allies fit into the Air Care Plus program, and I'm going to be talking about these components through the lens of our program. And similar to Jeff and Monica, when I say trade allies, I'm going to be speaking to the contractors and technicians that are enrolled in our program. So we do employ targeted enrollment to ensure that we at least set the contractors that are coming into the program up for success to begin with. So once we've gone through that initial vetting phase and they are enrolled in the program, we immediately start off with a training regimen on a number of facets. For the technicians, they're immediately set up with technical training. So what that looks like is an initial 1 to 2 day training where our field representative walks each new technician through the entirety of the program services up on the rooftop, regular problems that they can see, troubleshooting techniques that they can use, really trying to cover real life scenarios that they're going to find when they're up on the rooftops by themselves. After that point, they let those technicians go out and do work for about a week or a week and a half and set up a second technical training within 2 weeks, at that point to observe. So the technician has been out a little bit on their own. They've been following up steadily with our field representative. They inevitably have tons of questions once they get started. And through that second technical training, we're able to observe the mistakes that they're making, provide corrective actions, and just answer general questions that they've come across in the last week and a half. Now, concurrently, while that's going on, our in-office staff is training the owners, operators, dispatchers on our operational procedures, how to use our forms, how to use our Salesforce-based customer resource management system to track their customer projects, to sort through what projects have been completed and those that are still outstanding. And then at the end of the day, and I'll speak to this more later, all parties receive customer service training, which is very important. So after this initial, I'll call it assault of training, contractors and technicians really get into the thick of it. They're either going out and getting their own leads, or they're being assigned leads to utility representatives. They're performing work and they're following through. But with all that being said, that's not where training stops. All the while, technicians are constantly in connection with our field representatives with any questions they might have. As an additional backup, we have a support hotline for anybody, customers, contractor admin staff, the technicians, if they can't reach the field representatives. It's really that constant support and reliability that we provide. We also set up targeted and additional training as we start to apply our quality control procedures to the work that the technicians are completing. So if we're noticing a particular pattern of mistakes, we can hone in on that with a particular technician and train them on those components again and go over mistakes and how they can avoid them in the future. And that's really crucial for building the quality of the entire force that we have out in the field. And then we're always looking for ongoing educational opportunities. So a lot of times the utilities themselves have really great training opportunities that we will mention to the contractors and technicians that they can take part in. And the very last piece at the end of the day is recognizing the contractors and technicians for the work that we're doing. And we do this through a couple of ways. Primarily, we do annual rewards. So at the end of each year, we are measuring who's gathered the most savings, who's had the best results on their customer service surveys, and we're handing out physical awards for those. And what we found is that the contractors really appreciate those efforts. When I go to their shops, they're proudly displayed right on their front desk. I see mention of the awards that they've won on their website, so it's a really good sales tool for them and a piece that they really appreciate. We also employ contests throughout the year. Most notably, we do a September drive for savings where we calibrate per technician so that the larger contractors don't have an advantage over everybody else, and we pit everybody against their past performance. So we see who shows the greatest percentage improvement and hand out gift cards, which are always appreciated. Home Depot, Starbucks, nobody can say no. So speaking specifically to the trade ally role for our program, it's actually very similar to what Monica and Jeff were talking about. Our contractors and technicians are our face for the customers. They are either selling the program or they are, after a customer is referred by their utility representative, the next person they're talking to is that contractor. So it is crucial that the contractors are up to speed on every level of the program. The technical aspects, the administrative aspects. It really runs the gamut, and that's why we apply such a hefty approach to training and education, because there's so many components that can cause a contractor to either be successful or not meet with success. And a lot of these I have mentioned, and I'll go into further details on subsequent slides. So talking about a particular problem that we've come across in the past that we've addressed using training and education, at one point we were receiving poor quarterly customer service survey results, which were obviously not acceptable to us. In response to that, to kind of get ahead of that problem, we ourselves implemented monthly customer service surveys so that we could gather that information and really figure out the pain points and try and help educate the contractors to move past them. And what that turned into was the customer service best practice training that I've mentioned a couple of times. And in the end, the overall results that we've gotten back from these surveys is that 75% of the respondents are ranking the overall service as excellent, and the remainder are ranking service as very good. And the survey really covers how they felt about the contractor, whether their expectations were set appropriately, the follow-through that they received, and then their overall feelings about the program and how it went. So again, with that follow-through, we make sure that we have an annual reward for the contractor that got the best customer service, or so that we can, again, follow through and really hammer home what's important to the program and what we want to focus on. So talking about a couple of lessons learned, with this type of program, the training never ends. When our field representative walks off the rooftop, when we end the call on the webinar, that's never the end of it. You should always expect follow-up and provide those venues for the contractors and reps and their staff to get in touch with you. So our hotline, the direct line to our field representatives are really crucial. And again, recognition goes a long way. We've seen time and again where the contractors really appreciate getting those awards and tout those for future sales with customers. And even though I've talked about training being constant and ongoing and as needed, it's also really important, and I think Jeff was speaking to this as well, to establish a regular schedule so that a contractor or a technician knows they're always going to be checked in with at a certain time. So for our program, our field representatives, at the very least, visit each contractor shop monthly to go through the mistakes that they're seeing, the corrective action that can be applied, and troubleshooting for the future. So the contractors know that they are always going to get that level of support. And then at the end of the day, the reliability piece is key. There has to be somebody on the end of the other line, whether it be the field representative or office staff, to answer questions and provide that ongoing support that's needed. So best suited programs for this approach, talking about our program in particular, we have such a high level of support because there's advanced technical knowledge that's required. As Jeff was introducing me, this is an above and beyond routine maintenance service. So it's not skills that technicians coming into the program might necessarily have. So if you're adding additional skills into the pot and not just capitalizing on skills that they already have, this type of support structure might be needed for your program. You also need measurable performance indicators to be able to identify patterns of mistakes and follow through with those technicians and contractors that are having those issues, so that, again, you can be improving the quality of your pool of technicians and contractors as you go along. You will need high-quality technical and administrative support. Again, contractors and technicians are going to have lots of questions if they're in an area outside of their normal comfort zone, and you have to have the staff that's able to answer those questions. And with a high level of support that we provide, the staff that you're going to need will scale with your number of trade ally partnerships. So just to kind of wrap things up, that is the end of my presentation, but to touch on some of the key points from what we all spoke to, from Monica's presentation about recruitment, it's extremely important to enlist representatives from all aspects of the program in order to recruit those qualified and eager trade allies. From Jeff's presentation about technical support, it's important to provide helpful and relevant support by listening to your trade allies and incorporating their feedback into your processes. And from my presentation about training, education, and recognition, you need to offer your trade allies constant and ongoing training and make sure to recognize them so that you keep them engaged.
So that concludes our presentation. I assume you've already got some great questions submitted, but please feel free to keep sending them via that Q&A box at the bottom right of your screen. So let's get started. Monica, you mentioned that for recruitment efforts, there was limited support for utilities. Can you explain why?
So the utilities are quite supportive themselves, but the challenge is really with getting the utility reps engaged, and that's, again, because the utility reps are incentivized to promote programs based on the energy savings that the customer receives from those programs. And unfortunately, with the way that the utility structured, those energy savings were not going to be passed to those utility reps, which meant that we couldn't rely on them to help with that process.
Thank you. Next one's going to be for Jeff. Jeff, for a typical tech support program, how many calls and emails do you receive per week?
Well, actually, it varies a lot. We find that at the beginning of a program cycle, it'll ramp up, and then it'll tend to cycle down throughout the year. In kind of a typical average program, we usually get maybe 70 calls and emails per week through the first quarter, and then it'll ramp down to maybe an average of about 35 to 40 per week.
Okay, thank you. Tracy, can you explain how you're able to track trade ally performance to identify gaps in skills?
Sure. So we're able to track the performance of the technicians through our customized software. We're performing quality control on every measure completed, and we're also at the end of the day looking at patterns as a whole. What mistakes were made, mistakes were made over and over again, and it really comes down to the data that we collect from our software and how we cut and slice it and report on it as to how we're able to kind of identify those problems. But I would also add that it's seasoned staff that really adds that extra bit into the mix. They're really able to hone their eye at this point after years and years of experience to know exactly when something doesn't look quite right. So it's a mix of the two, having the support of software and reporting features, but also having really well-trained staff.
Thanks, Tracy. Monica, maybe you can answer this one. Who dictates what services are offered, and what do you do if with non-covered repairs or equipment replacement?
Good questions. This is more of a program design question. The repairs that are required for each contractor to complete are dictated based on the assessment of the technician on the rooftop. They go through and answer a series of questions, and depending on how they answer those questions, they are required to complete certain tasks. And the incentives are paid out accordingly. Not all repairs receive incentive dollars Not all required repairs receive incentive dollars, but I think there are around a dozen of them that do.
And Monica, kind of a follow-up to that. What if a customer won't agree to equipment replacement but insists on the repair?
Good question. So we actually don't deal with equipment replacement at this point. They're in the process of integrating this program with the QIQR program. It's in the early stages. But we do require the repairs. If they choose not to do the repairs, though, we can remove a unit from the program at that time.
Okay. Tracy, we're going to jump to you. Do you ever resort to SIFs or any other sort of incentives to trade allies?
We are actually currently looking into that. So that's not a strategy that we've employed in the past, but it's something we're looking forward to for the future. And I expect knowing our contractor base, I expect it to go over well.
And can you define SIFs for us?
Yeah, so for our program in particular, what that would look like is the completion of a certain number of measures, allowing a percentage payment over the incentives that they're receiving. So if they're getting SIF, if they complete 4 or more measures, then maybe they're getting an additional 5% of the total incentives that they're receiving. That's how it would look for our program.
Thank you. Jeff, next one's for you. Can you please speak to the logistics of staffing hotlines for ally programs? For example, are these folks located in a call center, or are they answering calls from their desks or in the field?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. The typical approach would be to use a call center. However, we have found that the technical nature of a lot of the calls we receive from trade allies require a more technical staff than you might find in a typical call center. And we use a revolving group of energy analysts and engineers that have their phones are on a phone tree, and they'll receive the call automatically from the 800 number. And so we have, for a typical utility program, we might man the phone with a portion of 4 to 5 energy analysts or engineers to handle the calls.
Okay, thanks. Tracy, back to you. How long did it take to build a strong trade ally relationship in your program?
So that's another good question. It's really dependent on the trade ally, I'd have to say. We have trade allies currently in the program that have been with us for 4 or more years. And I'd say with each of those, it's been a different story. Some we recognized within the first year or 2 that they were going to be excellent partners, and we just continued to provide that same level of support and, provided additional support when needed. And others, it's been 3 to 4 years in the making where we've really put in the time to get them fully up to speed, and now they're soaring and doing excellent. So each program kind of has to determine for themselves what amount of time they're willing to put into each relationship. And we've played the long game with a number of our trade allies, and it's worked out to our benefit.
Okay. Monica, one for you. What are the 7 incentives for, and who receives them?
Good question. So the 4 of the incentives are paid out to the customer, and they are spaced equally throughout the life of the contract. So let's receive the first payment when they are enrolled in the program. They receive the second payment at the end of year 1, and the end of year 2, and the end of year 3. And they ratchet down over time. The intent, we're trying to wean them off of those incentives. So by the end of year 3, they are ready to invest in that on their own. The other 3 incentives are paid to the contractor. They receive the first incentive when they sign up a new customer. It's an acknowledgement of the additional costs that they have to go through to get, and sales effort they really have to go through to get additional customers enrolled in this program over what they would typically do for a regular maintenance agreement. The second and third contractor incentives actually occur once they get those units up to baseline condition. They're paid a certain amount depending on the number of repairs that are required and which repairs are required and the different stats of the units. And then they also receive a little kicker at that time for the extra kind of headache that they're having to go through for all that and help offset the cost of some additional repairs that they might be having to eat part of that they'll have to incur in order to remain in the program.
I'm not sure who wants to answer this question, but can you please speak to how the programs have been branded? I'd like to know the extent to which allies derive value from being a qualified service provider. So I can answer that for AirCare Plus. I'll say certified technicians. We send them, once they've gone through the initial phase of the 2 technical trainings that I mentioned during my presentation, they get badges that have our logo and their name saying that they're a certified contractor, and they bring with them materials branded for the program that say AirCare Plus all over them, and we're really trying to loop them together with the program. So it's ex-contractor for AirCare Plus going out to perform service. I don't know if that quite answered the question. Does anyone else have something?
Sure. So the program that I work on is fairly young, but what I can tell you is that the contractors in our program, the techs really wanted to be associated with that. Some of them wanted to actually label their vans as being a qualified contractor or technician in this program. So that is very appealing to them. And we're doing what we can to help with that. We're providing some little clings for their trucks if they want to use them. And we provide them with branded marketing materials to help to kind of create that sense of trust with their customer.
Yeah, and with technical support, we really, we're not trying to provide the contractors with, anything additional they would, do above and beyond what they're currently, doing other than, technical, support about the programs and marketing material. So we brand as the utility. When the trade allies call into our hotline, they think they're calling in to the utility.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Tracy, for you, what metrics do you base your recognition and rewards on? Great question. So again, that comes out largely out of our software and the reports that we run. So if we're looking at providing an award for most energy saved, for example, that would come straight from the data we pull from the program. But in terms of outstanding customer support, we're looking for those contractors that were recognized during the customer service survey post completion of the project. So we look at a number of different factors. We also provide another award that's for outstanding teamwork. That one's a little more, we kind of determine as we've dealt with these contractors and the teams who we felt was the most cohesive, which technicians are really helping their fellow technicians out. So some of it is on us, up to us. Others we look specifically to the data for is kind of arranged. Thanks. And then one for the panel. Have you tried any upstream sales incentives eliminating rebates to customers and incenting the distributors, manufacturers only?
We're not doing any kind of new installation, so we're really focused entirely on those customers and contractors and helping them to increase their maintenance. So that's not really, at this point, there's always possible to be new equipment coming out. We may end up looking into some kind of upstream incentives like that, but at this point we're focused entirely on the contractor and customers.
And that's for HVAC quality maintenance. What about the others? Currently the same for AirCare Plus.
And we provide tech support to a downstream program, so we don't currently get involved with distributors or manufacturers.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question. So Tracy, getting back to this conversation, do IRS regulations regarding reporting gifts over $25 dilute the value of this form to trade ally recognition?
So since
all incentives and any potential spiffs that we're talking about go to the contractor. Contractors are already complying with all IRS regulations from the get-go. There's no contractor that's receiving under $600 in incentives for the entire year that gets out of those specific requirements. I hope that answers your question, but it's very specific. The incentives are to the contractors only at this point.
Cool. Thanks to you all. So thanks to our panelists, really awesome job, and thanks to you all joining us today for participating in the polling questions and sending in some really excellent questions. For more webinars look for more webinars throughout the year, and when you close out today, you'll be redirected to a survey. Please do take a moment to provide feedback and let us know what other webinar topics you're interested in. Thanks so much for attending, turning trade allies into true allies, and have a really great afternoon.